Howdy. Welcome back to Let's Talk Texas, the official podcast of the Texas House Republican Caucus. I'm your host, Jordan Overturf, aka J2, bringing to you another Texas Capitol lawmaker, legislator, insider, whatever you want to call them. Our members are down here doing the work of the people here in Austin at your state capitol. My guest today is State Representative James White, Chairman of the Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee, also author of very key permitless carry 2A Second Amendment, whatever your abbreviation is, carrying some important bills and helping vote out some key Republican priorities this session. So we had a great chat with him talking about what that committee hearing was like, in addition hearing the George Floyd Act and some criminal justice reform, going into the late hours, early morning to hear those constitutional carry Second Amendment bills. So we talk about that. We talk about the bills that he's carrying this session and other conservative priorities and kind of how things work here at the legislature. We cover a lot. I had a great time talking to Chairman White, and I know you're going to enjoy this episode. As always, I'm talking too much. I'm going to get out of the way. Let's talk Texas.
Thank you so much for having me. You got a great setup here. I like this.
Yeah, we're trying to innovate around here a little bit. So, man, it is finally starting to get real busy up here. Before we get into the heavy lift of the stuff that you've been doing more recently, how's your session been going? How have you been adjusting to the quote unquote new norms of the legislature?
Well, look, we hope it's not new norms. We hope there's a day when our folks from back home can come back to their capital or come to their capital more and participate in their government and visit their capital. It's a great capital. But to your point, look, we're taking all the precautions. We're wearing a mask when we need to. We're socially distancing. I tell folks I don't belong just to myself. I belong to my wife. I belong to the Lord, and I also belong to the people of East Texas. And we're proud to represent our folks back home in Polk, Tyler, Jasper, Newton, and Hardin County. So we've taken the vaccination, and we have a team in the office to maintain continuity of government.
Yep.
And we've cross-trained on different tasks in the office, so in the committee office. So we're doing what we think needs to be done, and we're doing and following the examples that our school districts and what they're following and what they're doing. They're wearing masks in their classroom. They're doing social distancing. They're taking all these precautions and protocols. So we're just doing the same thing here.
Yeah, and by and large, I mean, it seems like session's been moving right along,
Yes.
Aside from, a winter storm hiccup there.
Yeah. Just a hiccup.
Yeah. And we've already seen the House move on that ERCOT reform, get that passed out. And we've seen this week more conservative priorities are coming up. We've got pro-life bills in committees. Last week, you passed a couple constitutional carry bills out of your committee.
We did.
Before we get into that, you have been here for longer than most people realize. Just learning about Chairman James White. Take us back, give us a little bit of history. When did you first come to the legislature, and how did you get wrangled into this?
Thank you for bringing that up, because there were some folks that were kind of a little less informed, and they thought that was probably going to be the last one. Oh no, the first one leaving. And actually, I think in my class, I've been one of the last ones to stick around. But look, we came in that 2010 election cycle. I was elected out of the classroom, but involved in conservative politics and conservative causes for many years before I was elected. We got elected in 2010. We had a great class, that class of 2011, with myself, Representative Huberty, Representative Kuempel. I mean, it was just a great group of men and women from around the state that came in 2011. We came in during a tough budget cycle. We had to make the decisions that needed to be made, and I think we did that. And I think that's why we were in such a great position in years going forward as far as reforming and transforming our school finance system, making sure that we have the investments and the resources to maintain our water supply in the state and water resources in the state. We've done just so much up here. And I just give all the credit to the voters back home for continuing to send great people up here. And then when they get up here, they do the right thing.
Yeah, we certainly saw that from voters this last time around. Obviously, they were content with the successes that happened last session on school finance reform, property tax reform, but there's still more work to be done on these issues. You know, it seems like, and you can tell me this, having been here since 2011, though. It seems like Democrats believe in a one-time fix, right? They have the solution. They're the only ones with the solution.
Right.
And then when they implement it, it's going to fix everything and we never have to address that again.
Right.
It's a little bit more pragmatic than that,
Well, it's a little bit more pragmatic than that, and it's a little bit more thoughtful than that. So you have to look at each one of these issues. You first got to understand, is it a core constitutional government function? Then from there, you got to ask, is it right? Is it right for taxpayers? Is it right for families? Is it right for small businesses? You know, I was on another little podcast or interview this morning, and we were talking about, property tax reform and other fiscal issues. And I say sometimes, all the time, as a legislator, you can't just focus on the government's checkbook. You got to think about the people's pocketbook.
Amen.
And so we got to think, because the people's pocketbook determines if the state's going to have a checkbook.
For sure.
Right. So we have to focus on our families and our small businesses and our nonprofits back at home. That's really where the foundation, that's really where the spine of the society is, not here in Austin.
Yeah, and that's why this session, there's been such a big push to make sure that we are protecting small businesses, helping make sure that we're getting roadblocks out of the way so they can get back on their feet, get back to life before the pandemic, where they were just happy to live their lives, run a small business in their community, and serve the folks they live down there around with. And I know a lot of folks are pretty excited about the policies that are coming down the pike. One of those policies would be constitutional carry, permitless carry. Does it really matter what?
I think it does matter.
Okay.
I mean, because if it's permitless carry, I think that is a conjectural title that some are using to make it sound reckless. If it's constitutional carry, it's the idea that it's in a constitutional framework where the legislature, may it be in Washington, D.C. or in Austin or any state capital, has identified statutes and prohibitions on who can exercise this right. For example, we don't allow those that have become felons and that have especially violated our laws by endangering someone's life. We say they have forfeited that opportunity to possess and carry. If you're going through maybe what we call a mental illness or mental defect or a chemical dependency, we have statutes and laws that restrain folks, prevent folks, prohibit folks from carrying, possessing. So the whole idea about constitutional carry is that we recognize the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. We recognize Article 1, Section 23 of the Texas Constitution, that these are constitutional rights that at the least, at the most, the only thing really that government can do is protect them. Now, we do have these prohibitions in statute. Okay, and with those prohibitions in statute, that gets us to now who can constitutionally and lawfully possess and carry. So that's what we call constitutional carry. You can lawfully possess, so therefore you carry. If you couldn't lawfully possess, well, you couldn't carry. And why would we want you to possess if you couldn't carry?
Absolutely.
Right.
And that seems to be the crux of the argument, right? Is we're creating I mean, we already have it in place, this legal structure, right? And adding more laws will not stop those folks who are already breaking the gun laws from continuing to, thumb their nose at the system.
When you look at the 4 constitutional carry bills that were passed, filed. House Bill 1286 by Representative Biederman, House Bill 1927 by Representative Schaefer, House Bill 2900 by Representative Helfner, House Bill 1911 that was authored by myself. Okay. We're talking about lawful people. We have the statutes and the structure for the unlawful people. So I would tell critics or inform critics that you're right. Our bills, other than for highlighting the prohibitions, we're not focused on that because those prohibitions are already in statute. We're focused on the folks who are lawful. That's what this bill for is, for the lawful folks. It's not for the criminal folks. We've got the Code of Criminal Procedure. We got the Texas Penal Code. We've got those statutes in place for the unlawful, and we should. And we should make sure that they're tough and they're strengthened and they're constitutional. But this is for the lawful people. So, hopefully we'll continue to have this discussion. And I was just very proud of how my committee, we handled it. We had a 16-hour hearing that looked at 2, really tough pieces of policy, the George Floyd Act and constitutional carry. And there were some other issues that we looked at. But look, this is what we come up here to do. We come up here to tackle and address the issues that the people of Texas want us to address.
I swear I can hear the grassroots hooting, hollering, banging on tables right now.
That's what I hope so. I hope so.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that hearing because, obviously we know there's a lot of contentious issues that come to the Capitol and, it got a little out of hand. I won't say it was uncontrollable. It wasn't anything too chaotic, but it certainly, gummed up the works a little
for a few minutes.
Yeah. And especially and when you consider that how long that hearing went on and the wee hours that you were guys up here continuing to hear from citizens, allowing them to have their voice heard. How did you maintain your cool in that situation? And for other members who are chairing committees and they possibly have, some folks who want to be disruptive, what are your recommendations?
Well, look here. 7 years as a U.S. Army infantry soldier. We led men, men and women in a platoon in a company, unit, military unit, and then almost 2 decades as a middle school teacher. So we're used to outbursts in both formats, right? We're used to outbursts, and so the deal is always just keep things in perspective. That it's we're not up here for ourselves. We're up here for the folks back home.
Yep.
And, you would have thought that during the course of that day, especially with the first issue that we tackled, there was going to be some outburst. You just got to think that. This is a public building. We're inviting anyone to lawfully come up here and testify. So you would think that's the case. So the idea is to always keep things in perspective, and I think we've had some tougher days in the military and maybe some more interesting days in a middle school classroom before. So probably nothing we've never been exposed to before.
We'll have to bring you back after session and we could go down memory lane for some of those.
But I understand it was thought it was a mother of, and because when the outburst happened was during the George Floyd Act. And to let folks know, folks were like, well, why didn't, DPS come in and shut it down quickly and do this and do that? Well, DPS did come, okay? And they were ushering the people out, okay? And for the most part, it was screaming and hollering, okay? And so the DPS was doing what they would do in the gallery. They don't just go in and tackle people and throw them on the ground. They just usher them out. And I think that's sort of like the role of government, right? Restraint, okay, but still accomplishing the mission, right? So it was that, and obviously we didn't want to put anybody in a compromising situation. So we were down for about 10 or 15 minutes out of 16 hours that we were there, and then we got back on the bill and moved forward.
Did Miss T say anything to you after that?
I think, obviously kicking off that hearing, or at least that part of the hearing, with not necessarily invited testimony, but we did welcome some other members. Maybe we even had a member from the Senate. I don't know what that's about. Maybe they couldn't get a hearing over there, so they come over here. And
their rules over there are suspect. Right. So,
but the idea that there were members of the legislature that wanted to be on record about the George Floyd Act, and we allowed for that, understanding that there was still a grieving family, that family members of George Floyd that was there, and that they spoke, and I think the way it kicked off, and in a constructive way that it kicked off with the debate about the bill, I think the Chairwoman Thompson was a little unnerved about that. But look, we moved forward, and I think that was 9 hours, and then we took up some other bills, and then we started our testimony on the constitutional carry.
Yeah, I tried to stay up as late as I could for all those, and it was really interesting to see the number of Texans who came out and were still passionate.
Yes,
after midnight
for 4 bills.
Yeah,
4 bills. And here's another thing about this. We have a constitution in Texas, as we know, and our constitution prohibits us from hearing any legislation before the 60th day that is not on the emergency item call for the governor. So the governor did not include, and this is not a criticism of the governor, but just to say that constitutional carry was not part of that call, that emergency item call, nor was the George Floyd Act. So in many instances, we had to wait to bring those bills up for a committee hearing, right? Then, it's important for us to remember that the job of a committee chair is to manage the calendar, and I knew the next week we had Easter weekend coming up. Obviously, we would not have wanted, if we could prevent it, and I think we did. We didn't want to take it in late into Good Friday. Also, there were a lot of other good bills that were coming to the committee that had not gotten to the committee yet. They had not been referred yet on constitutional carry. So we want to make sure we had all the bills that were filed, because it's important for the grassroots to know this, that we want to be able to give our House leadership and calendars a full range of options. So we just didn't want to hear one bill and come back and hear two. We want to hear all those bills and get them moving, and we got 2 of them moving. So it's taking all of that into account, and the thought that being able to hear the constitutional carry bills in the order that we heard them, it gave us the possibility of some more discretion if we wanted to act on those bills. Okay? Yeah. And get them moving. So it's all of that. But the point is, this legislature, due to the leadership of Dade Phelan, due to the work of the members, especially the Republican members on the Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee, due to their leadership and their work, these bills on constitutional carry and other bills that deal with our Second Amendment rights, these bills are out of committee at a record time, where the calendars committee will have time to vet them appropriately and get them set on calendar in an efficient and appropriate way. And that's what has happened. And I think the credit, again, goes to House leadership and the members on this committee that have worked with me.
And all the people in the hills and the valley said amen.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes.
Well, you are obviously doing a great job in chairing the Committee on Homeland Security and Public Safety, leading on a lot of conservative issues. And we've talked a lot at length about constitutional carry. For you folks back home, what are some of the other bills that you're working on this session?
Good. Great point. We're working on bills that that lead us down a path where our law enforcement folks are conducting constitutional law enforcement activities that enhance local community safety. And at the same time, it uplifts our local law enforcement, our law enforcement statewide. Our law enforcement has been under a lot of scrutiny over the past several months, over the past couple of years. Some of it was probably justified. I think a lot of it is not justified. We're talking about men and women that are humans like you and I that have to make split-second decisions concerning the safety and peace in our communities, okay? And there's a lot that they need to know. There's a lot of training that they undergo. So we want to make sure that we're uplifting. One thing that we definitely, imparted to all the stakeholders that are concerned about police accountability. This was not. We're not going to have a session where we're just coming down to the Capitol, running down law enforcement. If you got an idea, make sure it's constructive. Bring it to us. We'll discuss it. We'll vet it, and we'll go from there. But this thing where we're just running down police, running down our first responders after such a tough time that they had during the COVID pandemic, it's just not the right thing to do. So even our law enforcement have come to me and said, hey, look, there's some things we need to do to improve our profession, to make sure that we maintain the trust and confidence of our citizens. They're coming to us with this. So we're going to be looking at more of those common sense, constructive, conservative police accountability issues. We're going to also continue to look at how we can ensure that TETM has the resources and the tools that they need to respond to the entire compendium, the range of threats, man-made, man-caused, whatever. Okay, we'll continue to look at that. Big on our plate is the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. It's the agency that licenses our law enforcement folks and regulates their training. TCOL for short. They're going through their sunset. And Chairman Cyrier is doing a great job in shepherding that through the committee. We voted that out last week as well. So those are some of the issues at the forefront. And again, we want to uplift our law enforcement, not just, criticize and berate. We want to uplift because, as I've told folks, we're lawmakers up here, okay? We pass laws and we go home. If there's no one back home enforcing the law, those laws aren't worth the ink or the paper that the ink is on.
Yep.
Okay? So we need law enforcement in order to breathe life into lawmaking.
Yeah, for sure. And, that discussion is continuing today as we're recording this. Big secret, guys. We pre-record these podcasts. I know Jason Vaughn at Texas Young Republicans is always pushing for criminal justice reform and these things. And it certainly is an issue that has come more to the forefront of bipartisanship, I would say. Is that something that you've seen, change? I wouldn't say dramatically, but, over the course of the last 10 years you've been here in the legislature.
This is what we're told, and that's what it looks like. I think a lot of the real good common sense compromise and final conclusions to these legislative efforts are pretty much, squared away at the Republican side. Okay. But yes, I do find out that when we're focused on core constitutional government functions, we tend to get a tad bit more bipartisanship. But still, this is an issue that has strong conservative roots as faith conservatives, as fiscal conservatives, as constitutional conservatives. This issue of criminal justice reform has resonance.
Absolutely. Any other bills that you want to make sure we talk about, or some of the pro-life stuff, border security,
Yes.
tax reform, anything like that you're
Well,
looking
yes.
into?
Let's look at that. And the border is. I'm very concerned about the border. I'm concerned about it now, even with the money, the monies that the legislature puts on the border. We put like $800 million a biennium on the border. But I'm very concerned because it seems like we have an administration in D.C. That is more concerned about obfuscation. They're more concerned about placating their base at the expense of border security, immigration enforcement, and the health, safety, and welfare of our customs and border agents on that border, our ICE agents that are on that border, to include the Texas law enforcement and Texas National Guard on that border. I'm continuing my discussions with the Attorney General and Attorney General's office. I think we need a new legal paradigm. In the past, we've worked in this bubble that when it comes to human smuggling, drug smuggling, human trafficking, that criminal type stuff. We said, the state has an interest in that. We can police that. We can enforce that. When we get into situations that are deemed, I'm using air quotes here, right? Purely immigration, case law has says that is strictly in the purview. It's been preempted by the federal government. I think we need help from our Attorney General to give us a different perspective there, because I've sat down with Henry Cuellar, maybe a more moderate Democrat from South Texas, who's the vice chair of the of the Congressional Committee in the House that oversees Homeland Security at the federal level, and we see where people are using the possession of children as a reason to get into the country, stay in the country, and get to travel around the country, get to settle here in the country. So when I'm asking the Attorney General, we haven't done it formally yet, but what I'm asking him is, we have private land along the border. When I know in East Texas, Sheriff Weatherford in Tyler County, if someone were to step onto my land without my permission, and I called him, that's lawful. That's unlawful criminal trespass. Okay, how can we get into the immigration fix just by enforcing our state laws? Here's another one. I think we're still in a pandemic. So to the extent that people are coming into the country, getting into the country, they're not being vaccinated or they're not being tested appropriately, I think any state in the union has at least an inherent, definitely an explicit responsibility on the health and safety of the community. So I think we need a new parameters, because if you had an administration that was really doing immigration enforcement, then you could kind of say that, right? But you can't say that.
Yeah, and it seems like they're more interested in policing the activities of citizens with these vaccine passports.
Right. And let's get into that.
I wasn't going to lead you down that trail,
but we're about to get into that.
All right, let's do it.
And the governor, and under his leadership, I think we're over 12 million vaccines administered. That should be somewhere about maybe 13, 14, maybe 15% of our population fully vaccinated. Every adverse data point is trending down. So the people are handling it, okay? We don't need situations where governmental units of subdivisions saying, well, to come into the courthouse or to come into a government building, you need to show where you've taken a vaccine. I think there's some HIPAA violations with that. So with that, what we're saying is this vaccine is still under emergency use authorization, so we need to take that into account. And so we've asked the Attorney General to weigh in on that. Is it appropriate for a governmental entity, state, local, county, to make you show your vaccination in order to get into a building. And I think the governor has already come out today strongly with an executive order saying any governmental entity or organization that's taking state or federal monies will not be allowed to do this within Texas borders. And then I have House Bill 2670, which also gets into this where folks should not be forced to do medical procedures that their doctor or their religion advises against. So we've got that in play. As many justices have said throughout this event, whether it's at the federal level or here at the state level, pandemics are serious. They need to be addressed, but the Constitution probably matters more in a pandemic because it's in times of declared emergencies and dangers where government tends to, get a little out of hand.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you have, language to codify that.
Yes.
Because that is where I think we continue to get into these tricky situations, as a kind way to describe it, where executive orders are coming from all over the place, city, county, state, federal level.
Can't keep up with them.
Exactly, right? And we've already kind of gone down this road in terms of regulation and making sure that there isn't a patchwork across the state. But at the end of the day, doesn't it seem to make the most sense that we use the systems we have in place, the legislature,
yes,
to be able to have these conversations in a public forum, allow all the citizens to come together.
Transparent. Right.
Transparency and accountability.
Absolutely. And it's the whole idea is, the executive branch, is what it is. I mean, it is built to respond swiftly, expeditiously to emergencies. Got it. But the legislature is the lawmaking body, and by nature it's deliberate. So where we need deliberate engagement, how do we open schools? How do we vaccinate our folks? I think that's when you start bringing in that legislative engagement, right? Mm-hmm. But, hey, we need to get the trucks over here. We need water over here. We need the National Guard over here right now.
Yeah. That
is perfectly in the scope of the executive branch because they're the branch of enforcement. They're sort of like a 24-hour operation, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So we want to get that right balance constitutionally to ensure that we are upholding and protecting, because our Constitution needs to be cherished and protected, because that's how we cherish and protect our people. And that means that we have this real healthy engagement among all three branches of government.
You know what? That's a great place to end.
Yes, sir.
I won't keep you any longer, but for the folks back home who want to keep up with all of your activities, where's the best place to find you on social media, website, all that stuff?
Yes, we've got a Facebook. Our Twitter handle is James_E_White. And so we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. I think we're on MeWe as well. So we're on the compendium of most of our great social media websites.
Well, now you got to get a Discord, and there's 15 other ones. I'll just send you a list of the 15 other ones. You just get your accounts.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, Chairman, thank you so much. We need to definitely have you back toward the end of session once we move on these bills and we see what we're sending to the governor.
See how it all shapes up.
Thank you so much for stopping by today.
Thank you.
See, didn't I tell you? Wasn't that a great episode? Chairman White, I cannot wait to have him back here for the podcast. He had so much to share in terms of what we're taking care of legislatively, how it works in the committee process, how he has managed everything over the last 10 years serving here in the legislature. I really just was thrilled to have a chance to talk to him about all the things going on here. For those of you who want to keep up, it's a lot going on down here. Committee hearings going into the early hours of the morning. Things are moving here in the Texas legislature. You want to stay up to date. Here's how you can do it. Follow the Texas House Republican Caucus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at TXGOP Caucus. Anyways, make sure you subscribe to this if you're listening to the audio version. We appreciate you listening on Apple iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We've got lots more interviews coming down the pike. A lot of things happening. We're going to be talking to lawmakers about key bills that continue to go through the legislature. So make sure you're tuned in here every week. Subscribe, follow, like, do what you do. Make sure you head over to TexasHouseCaucus.com for the latest. Sign up for our e-newsletter, all that stuff. Okay, that's it. We'll see you next time.